let me just comment about what we were doing. So for those of you that haven't really paid careful attention to large language models, because of course every one of us has been inundated with pushes for AI for the last 2 years since OpenAI introduced or really pushed ChatGPT 3.0 that's out there. I had the pleasure of going to Davos, Switzerland, in the middle of January at the World Economic Forum. It was quite an experience, but the one thing that really stood out there is as you went from shop to shop representing each company's presentations, every single one deals with AI. AI was every third word that was mentioned at the World Economic Forum because of its potential for cataclysmic change, which from their perspective is always an opportunity for cataclysmic revenue. Now, I don't care about the revenue aspect, but I do care about the use of large language models in order to pursue education and also to pursue or facilitate the construction of OER and such. And we're still at the infancy in being able to do that, but I wanted to mention this one thing. So we partnered with a company called Sandbox AQ. It's a spin-out company from Alphabet. It's a startup company. I think technically it's 3 years old, and it's a startup company with about $500 million of startup. So it's not a standard startup company in the way it operates. And they focus on a few things of particular interest. One's quantum sensing, one's AI for the finances, but they didn't focus on education. However, we had a partner in their company that introduced us to their approach, and they wanted to be able to explore the ability of using AI to deal with a large corpus of content, of being able to cut through it, slice and dice it, identify it, and such. And we were a great spot for that because we have the largest repository of open resources out there, or at least open textbook resources with 1 million+ pages and growing quite steadily since. So for AI large language models to work, if you firstly you should do a paradigm shift, or at least recognize what large language models are. And they're essentially glorified statistical engines. They're glorified engines that go through lots of content and identify correlations. They say, if you say this, you're more likely to do this or write this. If you do this, you're more likely to do this. And then they do that 100 pages, 1,000 pages, million pages, tens of million pages, the internet, quote unquote. And by making a massive parameterized infrastructure, and I'm not up on how many parameters that the current ChatGPT model has, they can identify all the different correlations that are out there. The real issue in terms of large language models, how can you use it in order to generate something new that doesn't exist within their model that they've been trained? Because again, it's a statistical model. And the answer to that is it doesn't work. Or it spits out garbage or things like that. And that's the new idea. That's the ability in order to push AI into thinking and not just regurgitating what it's been trained with. Now, I'm not an AI master, and I'm not going to go into more detail, but I wanted to at least lay the groundwork here that for large language models to typically operate, they need a large content of material in order to be able to work with, and we are quite ideal for being able to do that. So I want to play this video. And first I need to check to see if the audio works. Actually, the audio doesn't work. It doesn't matter because it's just music off of here. So I'm just going to pull this back up. And this is one of the promo videos that we have for our project. Okay. Um, besides the promo and the polish and the hyperbole that comes with these sort of presentations, this was meant in order to show what our tutor is going to be capable of doing. The infrastructure behind our tutor is what's called a RAG, RAG. If you're unfamiliar with that term, you should be hearing more of it in the near future. Does anyone uh, have an opinion about what they think is the biggest issue for AI in education? And just throw it out. Hallucinations. That's actually exactly where I wanted to go. Garbage citations, which is connected to hallucinations. Now, Ron, do you want to clarify what hallucinations are?
My understanding of hallucinations is where the AI unit just makes up stuff and purports it to be true.
It's true. Some people like the term mirages instead of hallucinations, feeling that hallucinations is ableist. Um, but nonetheless, hallucinations slash mirages is the event in which your AI gives you BS, incorrect information. Now, I presume no one in the audience here thinks that that's a good idea to have in academia. So that's one of the issues that people have been trying to deal with in terms of how to use large language models for doing that. And one of the reasons that you get hallucinations is that the model was trained on a lot of different data and it brings it up. For example, about a year to year and a half ago, if you queried ChatGPT, I can't remember which model, and you asked how many people live on Mars, the result is 1 million people live on Mars. Now, I presume we can all agree that that is wrong and that's a hallucination. Why did that? Well, it was trained in part by a science fiction book. And in the science fiction book, there was whatever it happened to be, there was 1.5 million people living on Mars. So it spit it out. So in this case here, the actual range of the material that was used in modeling or in building the model works against you. RAGs that stand for regenerative augmented generation works in a slightly different way. So the idea behind a RAG is that you take the content of a very narrow scope of things. For example, a book on a LibreText, for example, or a set of books, a bookshelf on our LibreText, or entire library, or the entire corpus of content that we have on our thing. That's still significantly smaller than anything out there. But the key point is that the content that's stored on our libraries are vetted, are written by peers, continually under development, yes, but significantly more reliable than other sources off of our system. So if we took the content and when you ask a question, for example, how do you do something with nursing, the example that was shown on the video here, it will go in and it will find the snippets, typically little chunks. They call this chunkification, and identifying these paragraphs that have some overlap with that question. That's via a process called a vector database. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. It's just the approach in order to say, this is your query. What content is close to your query? Fine. So in this example that was on the screen, here we go. They asked the question, my patient's experiencing shortness of breath related to heart failure. Which position in bed is best for that condition? It submitted that question to the vector database. The vector database then said, here are 4 topics that deal with this question. Now, there may be, in this case here, they're from 2 different books. Both from the OpenRN book, because this is a nursing project to begin with. 2 OpenRN books, one for nursing skills and nursing fundamentals, but they could come from different books entirely, or even from different libraries if we open up the scale. So I recognize that these are the 4 resources that have the highest capability of addressing the question. And then what the actual AI part is to take that model and do what's called natural language synthesis, digest it, and spit it out into something that is readable for people. Yeah. And that process right now is using ChatGPT, but it doesn't require that model. We can use something significantly dumber. cheaper to operate, what's called a small language model, or just a natural language model, and generate the output from here from these resources. That means that hallucinations, the introducing of junk, is immensely removed. I'm not going to say zero, but it's significantly smaller than what happens if you just use the large language model directly in order to generate your aspect. And that right there is what made me actually want to do this. Because when all the hallucinations and all the mirages and all the conversations that were discussed on AI since it was introduced basically turned me off and said, I'm not going to do this until technology was good enough. Technology is good enough. And it's just, a year and a half later, it's changing rapidly. So it does this, but we also have the ability, once it spits out the response, to spit out the references. So academically, this is able to scratch my academic itch. It provides the links that I can click on and say, if I want to read the raw material necessary in order to provide feedback of the response or the context behind it, or at least part of what was used in constructing that response, I can then go to it. And that's what just using a large language model raw without having the background is unable to do. We will expand this to also provide the attributions of the materials that are used in order to spit this thing out. Now, technically, the output of this material, at least the current state of the legal opinion regarding this, is that this is not creative. So therefore, this is not copyrightable, even though the material used in it was copyrightable, or ChatGPT or OpenAI may argue that it's fair use. It's a little complicated off of there. The key point is I'm going to respect that and show both the references of where to find the material as if it were a citation in a paper, and the attributions that we would use for compliance with open licensing off there. And we can do that because I know exactly what goes into the model itself. And that's great. So that means that when you make a book and we turn on this model, and the model has issues, not in terms of technology, but in terms of the cost associated with it, because it costs a decent amount of money in order to be able to run this. So it's not going to be opened up immediately. We're looking for ways in order to be able to facilitate that. It's probably going to couple into the sort of mechanisms that we'll be using for advancing Raymond's technology. But this is what people want. This is what people need in terms of being able to rapidly find content in a book that deals with specific topics that's out there. And that is exceedingly powerful for people to do. So I'm very excited in order to be able to release this. The other example that was on here was, asking for a detailed learning plan that comes out of these things. And the last one was being able to do this not just through textbooks, but through the corpus of questions we have in ADAPT. Because again, we have 250,000 questions in ADAPT, and the best way in order to be able to find the questions in ADAPT is to be able to catalog the content of the question and do a vector database approach, not necessarily to, or at least not exclusively via the meta tags assigned to questions. Many of you created questions earlier this week in ADAPT, and many of you probably didn't meta tag your question to describe what it's meant to address, its keyword, its learning objective. And in the absence of that, and the absence of a smart way in order to find that question, it becomes difficult in order to be able to search through that question. It's one of the reasons why I encourage people to browse to find questions rather than searching. So I'm very excited about this. It's open source. The model will be available for people in order to pick up and run with it. And we're testing it out first in nursing for a variety of reasons. One is that the partners that we have as part of the consortium to move this project forward involves wanting to scale this for handling student populations, particularly female student populations in the world that need a better education, because the infrastructure that they have in their countries are actually quite poor for this. The example that we like to give is Afghanistan. Afghanistan actually does educate females in nursing for females because males are not allowed to provide nursing assistance or medical assistance to females as per their interpretation of their religion. And this provides a mechanism, at least to give some education in order to advance that. So I'm very excited about this, as are my partners off of here and expanding it out. It's going to expand to the other topics that are more text-based, where large language models are far better to work with. But the STEM fields and the calculations and things, we need to take a very close look at to evaluate what it can do and what it can't do. And I would love to be able to modify our approach to have a little bit more computational capabilities and not just a statistical output that's there. So anyways, there were a few comments in the chat. That mentioned. Christine asked, the first year bio course in your campus has trained a language model on their course materials, notes, and test banks to make an AI tutor. They report that the AI tutor is correct about 80% of the time. Yeah, and that's not good enough. I think we can all agree that 80% is still not good enough. That gets out there. So part of that is related to the fact that it's biology, and part of it's related to the fact that depending upon how they train their model, or if they just basically provide some prompt engineering behind it. I'm not sure which one that they used, depending upon the material that they used in order to be able to process this. So, University of Toronto, yes. Okay. Okay. There are other aspects or utility of this model beyond just being able to provide a enhanced tutor or enhanced search infrastructure for faculty and students to find content on our platform. And again, this is finding content at the block level. This is not finding content like what's the title of a page. This is actually useful content. So that's a paradigm shift between pre-Google internet search capabilities, let's say Alta Vista, if for those of you that remember that, to when Google came on the scenes and actually provided exactly what you wanted when you did the searches out there, which is what built Google, and why so many people are interested in pursuing Adapt. However, this infrastructure will provide great capabilities for authors in order to facilitate the construction of good OER. For example, you create a resource. One of the more painful processes that people do after they create a resource is to create a glossary for that resource. And that can oftentimes take a lot of time in order to do. ChatGPT, in this case here, being able to go through your textbook itself and extract out the terms and things used right there, subject to what the natural language model provides, gives you the ability in order to basically click a button and say, make a glossary for my book. Now, it's always a good idea to review it that's out there, but because it's digesting your book itself in order to generate that glossary, it has a high chance of actually not just giving you the right set of keywords and the right terms for those keywords, but to actually write them in the way that you would prefer them to be presented because you use that presentation in the text itself. So it's more applicable for the students that you're at least targeting with your resources. You can use this in order to generate summaries of every book, every page. So at the top of every page, you have the ability in order to write a summary. That's what shows up when you do a search in order to make sure that acts kind of like as metadata. It is metadata in order to tell you the details of that page. This gives you the ability in order to flesh that out and give more details. It gives you the ability to meta tag the page itself to learning objectives, to taxonomies, and being able to identify what parts of your book are students review at different times, because you know that the content on this book was, or content on a specific page addressed this learning objective or this learning objective or these keywords and such. You can do a lot when you have a really powerful set of meta tags that have been aligned to a fixed framework. And as you'll see when we release the full analytics of Adapt, that it's going to be it's really powerful. And when we actually expand this into the library and brings it all together, this is going to be great. We can do this because we have a central repository that's standardized, and it's easy to digest and it's easy to spit this thing out. Having things fragmented in different spots makes it particularly difficult, and you have to do something like ChatGPT or OpenAI and scrape this site, scrape that site, scrape that site, scrape that site, and bring it together. Same thing applies even as for Pressbooks with their catalog system, because it's just basically federated examples. They're not a central repository in order to be able to do this, where we can press a button and then digest a book or a series of books across multiple topics or multiple campuses in order to generate a powerful infrastructure. Dr. Patel, this model does not have access to the rest of the internet. So this model is designed to only use the content stored on our platform as the components that spits out. The other parts of the internet come in terms of digesting the various components into here, which does not involve much other content. But because that's part of the model. So basically, this is meant in order to act as a natural language synthesis. It grabs content, merges it together, and presents it in such a way that's actually useful. If you don't want to do that, we can click a button that basically says, here are 5 snippets that deals with this stuff. Here's the part of the snippet that deals with it, and read each one individually and digest it in that way. Which is actually not a bad way in order to do that. In fact, that's easier for us because we don't have the large language model in front of that. And more importantly, that would provide the opportunity in order to avoid the costs associated with using ChatGPT, which is pricey when you actually scale things by the amount of traffic that we did. For example, if we open this thing up for everyone on our platform, and everyone on our platform did 1.5 on average queries a day, it would cost $250,000 a year in order to be able to maintain this. So this is the reason why we are not going to be opening this thing up, because I don't have $250,000 a year in order to be able to empower this. But the infrastructure is going to be there in order to do it on local purposes, and until we find a mechanism in order to be able to maintain it, it'll be used in a very narrow scope. Anyways, I'm very excited about this because I think this is done the right way in order to be able to advance that. Yes, there are details in terms of prompt engineering and modeling that's put in place behind it, but this right here, I think, is the right way to go using the information that we have and the infrastructure that we've developed. Okay, I don't see any other questions there, and we just have a few minutes left, so I want to talk about this other project that we have. And I don't have a slide in order to be able to do it, or I do have slides, but I can't find it. And one of the issues that we've had since we started growing massively a few years ago was that we developed an infrastructure that you guys have been exploring. You guys recognize it's complicated in the sense that it has lots of freedom for being able to address various goals and such, but it requires a bit of training in order to get access, not just to get access, but to be able to master, or at least be competent in each of the components that's out there. There are campuses like Rachel's campus that has a desire in order to scale things up appropriately and capitalize on what the LibreVerse provides, because that's what the LibreVerse is designed for doing. That being said, we're asked multiple times in order to do some level of professional development and some training, very similar to this week's training, which is meant for the general public. So we decided to actually fold together all our training efforts under a single moniker that we call LibreText Academy, or just the Academy. And that academy consists of 4 things. It consists of large-scale meetings and conferences, which is essentially our summer LibreFest and our Oktoberfest, or our fall Oktoberfest. Those are large. So we've had numbers exceeding 120, 150 or so. This has been relatively small this year. Also folded under the Academy will be our in-person or virtual workshops. So those things are typically focusing on specific fields. Many of you have seen our workshops at your campus, focusing on ADAPT, or if you're from other campuses that have had other topics like a greater aspect of the scope of the LibreVerse, editing, remixing, or other things that's out there, that will be available within the Academy. The third component of that is that we're going to be introducing a cohort series. So we'll be able to provide the opportunity of a small group 5, 6 or so people, and basically have a year-long training process that's akin to what we did here, but again, smaller and targeted in order to customize for what that cohort needs. So if that cohort needs to have a conversation around licensing, we can have the detail of licensing and the detail of other components. Now, there are other people who do something similar to this, but no one does something like this with the massive experience that we have with 16 years in the OER landscape and basically dealing with tens of thousands of projects since, ranging across multiple aspects and multiple things. We have been tried by fire, and we know things that we don't even know that we know that come up when we actually talk about various things. So we're going to be announcing this cohort series later on this month, and it'll probably come on board sometime in fall with people who want to do that. And it'll be comparable to the same cost of other series that come out from Rebus and AAC and other companies that are trying to make money off of this for profit. But of course, it'll be subsidized or intended for sustainability. The fourth thing within Academy is asynchronous professional development. So we're going to be using the Nova system in order to run asynchronous courses. So you can come in and say, I want to get a certificate, quote unquote, in Adapt. And there'll be, here is a 10-hour overview of Adapt that's more extended of what we did here, that goes through the different aspects, and it'll have the appropriate training, not just the curriculum, but also the assessments using Adapt, in this case here, to evaluate learning of Adapt, which is well designed in order to be able to do. And that will be, again, asynchronous, and anyone who needs that training can come in and just basically run it. So this arm is particularly important for achieving our mission. So it's not just being able to build this massive infrastructure. We want to make sure that people are able to use it effectively and to be able to guide them with them. And you will hear more about Academy in the near future. If you have any questions regarding that, feel free to reach out to me or reach out to Jennifer Rogers here, which is, and she can paste in her email address. I think it's jrogers@libretext.org. And with any questions or concerns, if you want to be able to do that. I know many of you have been in campuses that have been interested in our workshops, but the cohort series we expect to be actually quite successful because there's a need for these sort of things. So with that, I will thank you for your attention for the last 45 minutes that kind of went over some unique aspects that I haven't discussed before. I thank you for attending the whole workshop. We were very happy with what we presented. We're very happy with the interactions we got, and we're very excited in order to help you continue to use the platform as you've learned today. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us. I've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again just to close this thing out. Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, we have our office hours. It's open to anyone in the world who wants wants to address issues dealing with LibreText. So come on board. It's not locked down, and it's available at zoom.libretext.org. Jennifer can paste it into the chat here. And the only times that we don't run them is this term or this week during LibreFest, where we basically shifted it from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock as part of the conference proceedings. And it can be oftentimes quite interactive and engaging. And I enjoy, it's actually the highlight of my day, talking to people and learning how people are using our platform in order to pursue their unique goals, because everyone has a different vision and everyone has a different application, and it's great to learn that.